Foundations, everybody. How are we doing today? Good? Oh, yeah. Welcome to Florida. And Full Sail. Nice. Yay. Get used to it. It's hairy around here. It's kind of the way the place rolls. All right. Well, welcome to 3D Foundations. I know you guys are really excited because this is your first 3D class, what you came here for. So there's always a lot of anticipation rolling into this one. And definitely one thing I want to make sure you guys are all in complete understanding of, even from day one, this is where your career actually starts. This is where the classes are going to get significantly harder. So what I want you to do that will do us both a huge favor is take everything you think you figured out in this first couple of classes and forget you ever had them. Because this is big boy, big girl school. We're doing it for real now. And what you're trying to do is prepare yourself for a career that will hopefully last a long, long time. Does that make sense? We've only got 2 years to do it. So we got to saddle up and play hard now. This week, there's no more fooling around. This is for real. Does that make sense? Okay. That being said, if you have never taken notes in your life, this would be a good class to start doing that. There's a lot of information that comes out. And again, this is an accelerated program, which means we cover about 3 days worth of material in 1 day. So that's a lot. So A, don't miss any. That's obviously bad. And B, you're going to have to write this stuff down. And it's not at all an indication of how smart you are or are not, or how creative you are or are not. Literally, there's a lot to remember. If I gave you a list of 47 animals to memorize in order and you didn't write them down, you could never come up with those animals in order. Does that make sense? And that's got nothing to do with intelligence. That has everything to do with memorization. But a lot of what we do is memorization, a series of very specific steps that have to be followed. That being said, if you don't have those steps, you will flounder tremendously. Does that make sense? Okay, so I do try very hard to explain things in a way that makes a lot of sense, but I cannot impress upon you enough. As a species, we have been learning for thousands of years by writing stuff down because there's sort of a kinesthetic element when you physically write things. It helps sort of burn it into your memory so that you can remember it. It is much easier to recall. It is much easier to do the work because you have the instructions. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm just letting you know up front. It's going to be harder. And each week we learn new and different and more complicated material. So even if you start to feel comfortable with week 1, there's going to be more stuff week 2 and then more stuff week 3, and it builds on itself. And then here we are in week 4 and we're still calling on things that we talked about week 1. So it's easy to forget that stuff. Does that make sense? Okay. If you just listen to the information, you're renting it. If you write it down, you own it. And that's what we want to do. We want to own the information, not borrow it. Does that make sense? Good hell yeah? Oh, good. Awesome. That was a pretty good hell yeah for day 1. Awesome. We are going to have a lot of fun, but we are going to work because we want to be successful in this field. And this is a highly competitive field, which means you are going to have to beat out many other people who want the same job as you do, which means a C in terms of the quality of your work and focus and effort is not going to do it. Not C as in a letter on a piece of paper that says you went through the machine, but see what that means in terms of how hard you worked, how devoted you were, how much you applied yourself to your work. Does that make sense? Letters are just a means of you sort of gauging hot, cold, medium. But the quality of the work, the intensity of the student, the focus and the drive to be successful, that's what's really reflected by those letters by comparison to your peers. Does that make sense? A little bit? Okay, so it's not the letter, because you can beg me, oh, please, please, give me a B. That doesn't mean you did B work, though. Does that make sense? And by the way, you're striving for the best you can get, whatever that is. And in each class, you get more and more, better and better. And eventually, when you graduate, hopefully you are producing nothing but A work all the time. Make sense? Okay, so that's my goal. I'm hoping that's your goal. And with that in mind, that's how I would love for you to approach this material, because you will have the best success and, to be honest with you, the most fun if you go at it that way. Waiting to the last minute to do stuff, trying to remember everything, throwing it together and sliding it in the mail slot at the last minute typically yields a grade that's reflective of the amount of time you put in it. There's not really a shortcut to this. You got to put in the time. So that being said, I know you have a ton of questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through today's material, and periodically I'll stop and I'll say, okay, Does anybody have any questions about what we've talked about so far? And then, we'll address all of those questions as we go. And then when we get to the end, then we can shoot for the moon with whatever time we got left. If you've got additional questions, please fire them my way, because I'd be more than happy to answer. But otherwise, if we go too far off track, we'll never get through it all. And I love tangents, so I will go right down that path with you, because they're awesome. But we gotta stay on the road. Make sense? Hell yeah? Ooh, 2 hell yeahs in the first one. Awesome. All right, well, let's start talking about 3DF, what we're doing and what the heck's going on. All right, welcome to 3D Foundations. Your career starts here. Probably one of your first questions is, who are you working with exactly? This is one of the instructors in the lab. We call them studio artists. We have 2 environments. There's the lecture environment and the lab environment. They're a little bit different. In the lecture, we dispense information. In the lab, we execute. There is some execution in the lecture. We'll talk more about that. But the lab is where you're really going to get your hands dirty, roll your sleeves up and get in there and have some more help directly one-on-one when you need it, as there's more instructors that can focus on just you and whatever problems you're having. So make good use of that time. But in terms of the people who are in there, this is one of them. That's Marcus. And when we designed this class, one of the things I asked everybody to do was build a Lego person of themselves. So that's what Marcus thinks he looks like as a Lego person. So hopefully you'll recognize him by that. And if you look at his interests and things that he likes to do, you'll notice he talks about his areas of specialty being modeling, texturing, lighting, and rendering. These are different disciplines along the CG production pipeline. How many of you guys have heard that term before, CG production pipeline? A couple of you. Okay, that's cool. No, and again, this is a beginner's class. I teach it like you know absolutely nothing, so don't be afraid. The overwhelming majority of you don't know what's going on. The few who speak up are the ones who do know a little bit, and that's why they're brave enough to talk, but that doesn't mean everybody knows everything. Does that make sense? Because that's what happens in classes typically. Uh-oh, I didn't even know what those words were. I'm not saying anything in here. Or they'll find out. Yeah, but I know, trust me. You're not gonna fake me out. So in terms of the CG production pipeline, it works a lot like an automotive assembly line. At one end, we have an empty frame, and at the other end, we have a car that we can drive. So what happens is this frame moves through the assembly line and it stops at a series of stations. And each station has a specialized job. They do one thing, they do it really well, and they do it really fast. So for example, if I'm the guy who installs doors, the frame comes to me, I put a door on it. Next frame comes to me, I put a door on it. And because we work like that, we do it very quickly and very well. Does that make sense? Okay, so CG production pipeline, same idea. I've got storyboards or concept on one end, and I've got a movie, I've got a video game, I've got whatever I need at the other end. And again, there's a whole team of people who work together and they pass this thing along and we all work together, and our work is interdependent, very much so. So we learn how these disciplines actually impact each other. So once you're done with your job, that doesn't mean it's over with. Somebody else has got to deal with what you did. Does that make sense? So you can still get in trouble. So this is why we're working on the concept of not only am I an artist, but I'm part of a large team of people. And I have to make sure that what I'm doing is actually helping the next person in line with what they have to do, because that breeds efficiency. And in this line of work, time is absolutely money. You can literally point to the dollars per hour it takes to make X project. Make sense? Okay. So feel free to ask the studio artists about any of the disciplines that they're involved with or interested in. They'd be more than happy to talk to you about them. This is Sarah. That's right, we have a girl too. That's a girl, that's a girl right there. I can see we're gonna have to have some remedial classes as well. I won't be teaching those, but I can put you in contact with the correct staff. All right, so this is Sarah. And you can see she is into cats. So if you talk about cats, she will be all over that. You notice that her areas of interest are animation, rigging, and modeling. Typically, animation and modeling don't go together. It's an unusual combination, but that's why she's so helpful with the class. So if you're thinking, hey, I'd like to know more about animation, you know whose brain to pick on that, because she loves to talk about animation. She'd be more than happy to show you some of her work, which I recommend highly you ask to see anybody's work. So again, big into cats, and honestly, these guys are terrific. They're super helpful, very friendly, very kind, excellent with beginners, and that's why they're working in this class. Honestly, I have had chunks of time where I had to like have fewer than the number of staff that I wanted working on the team, because I wanted to make sure I had the right people in place, because I think that means everything. So these guys are terrific. Please talk to them, take advantage of the help they have to offer. They love to talk about what they do, and they love to share their work and want to see your work and help you to make your work better. So you really can't ask for a better combination in terms of personality for you guys. So make sure you're making good use of those guys in the lab and wherever you happen to catch them. That's me. You probably would have guessed. And that's my Lego person. And in terms of the CG production pipeline, I think the whole thing is pretty cool. I really enjoy just about every facet of it. They're all very different in terms of the things you do there. I wouldn't necessarily want to do all of them as a job. You know, some of those would definitely drive me crazy, but I know how they work and I appreciate how they work, and I know how what I do affects the other disciplines, and that's what's really important. And that's why I say no matter what class you're in, you should pay close attention and understand it, because somewhere along the line, your work is going to impact that discipline. So you should be at least aware of how it works so that you can do your job better and better help those who are further along. So again, I recommend learning as much as you can about all of them, because the more you know, the more valuable you are to an employer, particularly a smaller company, because they're going to ask you to wear more hats. Does that make sense? Larger companies, a little bit more specialization. A smaller one, they're going to ask you to do more, very likely. And again, you look more attractive to a company the more you know. Yes, go ahead. Air chair, it's really cool. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but basically what they did was they took a chair and they mounted on a pole, and at the bottom of the pole is a mono ski, and literally you sit in the chair with a seatbelt on and they pull you behind a boat. So what happens is you're like dragging along the surface of the water, and then all of a sudden you hit the right speed where the ski takes over. So now you're on a chair on a pole and you're shooting across the lake, and it's wild. To turn, all you have to do is look, and literally that's enough to make the air chair turn. And if you want to go down, you lift the rope up, and if you want to go up, you lift the rope down, and it's lit, or you push the rope down, and it shoots you up into the air like a cork. My typical ride time, 7.5 seconds. Yes. Other names people have called me, I thought that was a funny one. My friends. You know friends. They love you, pick on you. I love movies. No. I love movies in general. I think every movie has something that you can watch, appreciate, and learn from. Even the worst movies ever made, there's some redeeming quality to it. You have to look a lot harder to find it, but it's there. But it is out there. All right. So next question you're probably wondering is, what the heck am I doing this month? What are we going to do? And what we are going to do is build assets or objects. And what we're going to do is build these objects, and they're from the everyday world all around us. And we're going to build these individual objects, or as we term them, assets. And then ultimately, we're going to bring them together into a final scene where we're going to render it, which is like create a final picture of, and it's sort of a still life of the things you've built. And basically, much like when you're first learning to draw, you start with still life, because you need to learn to master reality before you can draw plausible fantasy, right? So idea holds true for modeling as well. In fact, modeling has a lot of drawing-like concepts in it, so you'll see the similarities. But in terms of art, we start with still life. So for modeling, we're going to start with still life, because we want you to be able to reproduce exactly what you see to the best of your ability, realism, so that when it comes time to making the really cool fantasy stuff, you can do it no problem. Does that make sense? Because you literally, not only do you have to understand the tools, and not only do you have to master the skills and all this, you have to understand what you are trying to build. You literally have to know it. It's not just a function of, I drew it. You have to know that thing. There's a relationship between you and the stuff you create, and an understanding of that object in order to build it properly. Does that make sense? Kind of a weird thought, but when you model something, and you'll find out as you go, but you know that thing intimately. Like if you're modeling a tree or something like that, you know exactly what tree that is, the genus, the species, you know what it likes in terms of its climate, you know the predators and illnesses that plant could contract. I mean, it's amazing what you need to know to do your job well. You're kind of like a specialist in reality, which is pretty wild. But that's kind of the way it goes. You need to know this stuff. You need to own this stuff. In what? Oh, we're going to be modeling in Maya all month long. Absolutely. And some of you have some experience in other applications, which is great. But we are definitely modeling in Maya, and this is a Maya-driven school, so everything you do will be in Maya. So what I would say is, if you do have previous 3D experience, that is awesome, because 3D is 3D. It doesn't make a difference what application is doing it. It's just what's the name of the tool and where the heck is it in the interface, because it's all different. But what I want you to do is let go of your application and let Maya in. Just take it with the baby steps we give you and realize that the concepts are the same, and you'll get it just fine. If you try to turn Maya into what you already know, you're going to be frustrated. Does that make sense? So in many cases, I've seen people who come in with previous 3D knowledge, and it's more frustrating to try to turn it around. So people who are coming in with a blank slate, I think honestly have an advantage, because they just let it in without any argument. Does that make sense? Okay, because whatever you learned first always seems like natural and intuitive, and everything else seems stupid. But that's because you learned this first and not that second or third. So they always seem harder. But I can assure you, the reason Maya is an industry standard when it comes to movies is because of the tools are great. The versatility is there. The workflows are amazing. It works with so many other applications. There's a really good reason that's why it's in place, and a really good reason that's why we teach it. So you just have to trust us and take it as we give it to you, and then you'll be using Maya just as fast as anything else you've ever used. Does that make sense? And that's an awesome question. Thank you for asking that, because I like to bring that out whenever and wherever I can. Oh, remember that one student, Brian, who knew Cinema 4D or something like that? And she was saying, I'm so frustrated because I'm here at work and I'm doing Maya controls. We taught her how to use Maya, and she liked Maya better. You know, that's something you got to wrestle with. Technology changes, workflows changes, so you got to be able to jump with it, whatever it is the company you want to work for is using. All righty. So again, we're going for this still life, this final image of all the objects that you've built. And it's kind of like a stage, you know, and it's like the stuff that you've built, those are the actors that are telling the story. And I just want to create a little area here, and you can go, look what I did. And, you know, this you can put on your Facebook page or print it out and put it on your refrigerator. Tell everybody, look what I did, month 1, computer animation. So very exciting to be able to share that and have something tangible. All right, now in terms of the objects that we're building, the objects come in different levels of complexity. We have the easy level 1 assets, and those are our minion level assets. And then we move up to more complex objects, which are level 2 or our boss level of assets. And then we get to our level 3 assets, which are the most complicated that we're going to ask you to build. And those are our supreme poly commander level assets. And those objects are very challenging. And for those of you who are a little bit more advanced, maybe you want to take a run at some of those guys. They will help you push your limits, because the complexity is there. So if you want it, there's no shortage of hard things to build. Yes?
What are some examples of a level 3 in asset?
Well, if you open up the level 3 asset folder that you downloaded, not right now, but if you do, you'll see the images of the objects we're going to have you build. So it's all there. You can look at all of these objects, and you get to choose which one you want to build. You know, I'll tell you, I want you to build 3 level 2 assets. So you go to the level 2 folder and you pick 2 of them or 3 of them, whatever we ask for. Does that make sense? And as always, obviously, we're building new assets every week. So just bear that in mind. We don't turn in anything twice. We don't rebuild the same thing again. New assets every week. All right. Now, if you follow our progression, you're actually going to be able to build your own Lego person at the end, because that's one of the level 3 assets. So you can make your own little Lego dude, which is very fun, actually. And surprisingly harder than you would think. Like you look at that and you're like, that's a cakewalk. Wait till you build the arms and the legs, my friend. And of course, you got to have really cool accessories if you want to properly equip your Lego person. So get you to build some of those too, if you like. All right. Now, any questions about the objects themselves? Anything about that? The assets? No? Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the grading, because this is very important. Typically, if there's a misconception about the grading, it's that the fact that you might think, oh, what I've built looks beautiful. I love it. That's the greatest looking thing I've ever built. Obviously, I'm going to do great on it. Let me show you how much great looking counts for. If you look at these criteria, artistic criteria is the blue, 34%. So if you've built the most beautiful pepper shaker I've ever seen in my entire life, it's gorgeous. I show my friends, they swoon in anticipation of the next thing you're going to model. You can only get a 34. Does a 34 pass? No, that's not even halfway there, right? So the point is, we have two other criteria, technical criteria and organizational criteria, that are equally important to how good it looks. So I don't want you to say, hey, it looks good, my work here is done. No, we are part of a pipeline. Art for yourself, when it looks right, you're done. When you are working for somebody, you are part of a pipeline. You're not done until things are properly organized and everything adheres to the technical specifications of the assignment. Because what you do will be plugged into something else. And if you didn't build it properly, it doesn't get plugged in. It doesn't get plugged in, you don't get paid. Does that make sense? The most valuable thing you own is your name. And you want your name associated with hard quality work that comes in on time, and you have a great attitude and you work in a team. If I could make that into a shot for you guys all to do, we'd be doing them right now, because that's what's really important. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, these other criteria, although not necessarily artistically driven, equally important to be a part of a team that is working on a project, and that's why they have so much weight. Also, this gives the opportunity to people who are brand new to this to not be too heavily penalized for not being great artists yet, because there are other things that you can get points for. Does that make sense? Okay, so a bit of a ramp. Let's talk about the class structure, lecture and lab. As I said before, we have two environments. We have the lecture environment and we have the lab environment. The lecture environment is where you are right now. We are going to talk about tools, techniques, strategies, all kinds of things to help make you a better, more efficient modeler, and a modeler who's ready to work in a team of people in order to achieve whatever the goal of the project is. So when we are in the lecture, the best way to use your time is to take great notes, ask awesome questions, participate whenever and wherever you can. Be a part of what's going on. It's much easier to learn when you're focused and in the zone. So I always recommend, sit as close as you can, be as engaged as you can. You're not going to be judged or picked on. None of that goes on here. This is a completely safe environment. And again, I build one for beginners, because I was a beginner too. And believe me, some people are like, part Android, and they get into these applications like they bond with it in some way, and they understand each other and they speak binary or whatever. That was so not me. I come from a traditional art background. I was not a very technical guy at all. And I walked into this field and I was like, holy cow, boy, am I in over my head. But what I decided was, this is what I really want to do though. It's actually a lot of fun, and boundless creativity is very exciting to me. The fact that you can make anything you can think of, how often can you do that? So I said, you know what, this is not my thing. This is not the way I was built, but this is what I want to do. So I have to learn this. Does that make sense? So I had to make that part work for me, because that's not where I came from, but it meant enough to me that I did. So you can do it too. Believe me, if I can figure this out, you're going to be fine. But you are going to have to try really hard. Maybe a lot harder than you're used to trying, but you're going to have to try hard. Make sense? Okay. So in class, definitely participate. Be active, take notes. Examples of bad things to be doing during lecture time: having your phone out, checking Facebook, emailing, texting, working on your assignments. You know, I know it's very enticing. Oh, 2 hours I could be working on my work and then I could have more time to play video games at home. The most important thing you could be doing in here is listening to me, because a lot of the information that I give you guys, it's not out there anywhere else. You can't really get it anyplace else. So you're gonna have to put in the time. You might as well do it here live so we can talk. And my digital friends who are watching, you guys, if you come to these live lectures, you can ask me live questions. We can engage. And I know that's much more interesting than just watching a video. So if at all possible, come watch the live lecture, come in, be a part of what's going on. It's so much easier to pay attention that way. You know, you feel like you're involved. Does that make sense? Okay. So, you know, until they figure out a way to get me into everyone's house, this is as close as we can get. So come see me. This is way better in terms of your learning. So again, in terms of the lecture, yeah, we talk about a lot of stuff, but we do things in lecture also. We have little mini activities. And the way these activities work are, I'm basically going to explain to you a tool or a process, and then we have a little activity to back it up. So you'll have to actually do something based on what we just talked about. So if I finish talking about something and I go, okay, let's do an activity now, and I tell you the activity and you're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get started. I'm lost already. The way you are approaching the class right now is not working. Does that make sense? If I tell you how to do something and then you can't do it right after I told you, your approach to your education is not going to work. So the good news is you know right away if what you're doing is working or not. Does that make sense? If you're writing notes on paper and I tell you, okay, it's time to do an activity and you can do it looking at your notes, you can execute, great, that's perfect. If you're typing it on your computer because you prefer to type, also fine. You can't draw pictures and laptops do run out of power, so paper is sweet. But if it's working, fine. But again, if you feel like the minute I stop talking, you have no idea what's going on, then what you're doing doesn't work and you need to switch it now. Does that make sense? Because I know we have a whole month. It goes by fast, really fast. So you don't really have time to catch up. And that's why I try to warn you guys a lot up front so that you know. You know, I don't want you to rediscover the wheel. I've been teaching this class for 10 years. I know what works well and what tends to not work. Does that make sense? Okay, and I'm just trying to save you the time. I don't want you to go through it, you know, learn from what we figured out. But anyway, so we have these little activities that can keep you up to date with what we're doing and you understand, and then we do some more talking and then we do another activity and it goes like that. Now, at the end of each day, we have what we call skill checks. And a skill check is basically saying, when we were in class today, we talked about this, 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 and this. So you have to take all those ideas and make this project. So if you are able to make that project, you understood everything we talked about today. Again, affirmation of your understanding on a daily basis. If you can't do the activity, the skill check, then obviously you missed something that's important. And that means I need to ask more questions. I need to take better notes. Does that make sense? I need to get more engaged in lab. So again, a lot of things to help make sure you're seeing and doing and understanding. So look for the signs, because you know, we don't always catch it. I think that's probably one of the more frustrating things is we don't know if you're struggling if you don't tell us you're struggling. It's easy to hide despite our best efforts. So again, you have to be a little bit of a judge of yourself and say, hey, you know what? I am blowing through these activities. I got all my skill checks done. I'm doing great. I own this material. I don't need as much help as maybe somebody else might need it. Great. You know, or you say, hey, I can get through the activities, but I'm struggling with my skill checks. Okay, then we need to start asking more questions in lecture. We need to get more engaged with the studio artists when we're in the lab, or take advantage of our online digital help, because we have that too. Did you guys see that, the Google Hangout thing, the help activity? The help activity If you download Google Chrome, and we gave you a link for that so you can do it, it's free, and you click on that huge red help button, it launches the Google Hangout, and that's basically an online environment where you can go to get help. And the help is either in the form of other students who have taken this class already, and they still hang out in there because they love to help people. Students in your current class are in there looking for help. We also have time where instructors from this school are scheduled to be in there. And they're there too to help answer your questions. So if like asking questions live and in person kind of freaks you out a little bit, and I get that, go to the Google Hangout, get some help in there or help somebody else. Nothing feels better than helping somebody else with something. I have to admit that feels great. That's one of the things I really love about teaching. Also, what's really nice is, and I've discovered this over time, when you teach someone else how to do something, you understand it better. You're actually helping yourself as well. It's a little bit selfish in that regard, but it is amazing how that works. So go to the Google Hangout. It's open 24/7, it's completely free, and it's help and advice. And what I typically recommend is, if you're gonna be working on Maya, and you should be doing that a lot, go ahead and hit the Google Hangout button, launch it. You might not have a question, just have it open and ready to go. Because if you're having trouble remembering something, you can always ask. Make sense? Okay, super easy to use. Please go there. Brian populates that anywhere. Incidentally, I'm very sorry, I did not introduce Brian. Brian is also the course director for this class. I know, I'm sorry, I went through that slide too fast. I asked him to make a Lego guy. He still has to make me one, so I can put him up there too, and I won't forget. But Brian is also the course director for this class, and he is in charge of the Google Hangout. So a lot of times you can go see him, and he's the guy you're talking to when you need some help. They're just terrific. They're so helpful. I can't tell you how many emails I get from students. They're like, hey, Maya is doing this, and it's talking backwards, and my screen's flipping around, and flames are coming out, and it's telling me it's the devil. What button do I press to fix that? And it's not a one button thing, and I cannot even begin to write the email long enough to explain what you have to do. It's not going to work. And phone calls, forget it. That's not even visual. Your best bet for help, unless it's talking to us live, is go to the Google Hangout and get some help in there. Does that make sense? We can demonstrate, we can see what you're doing, explain how to fix it. That is the best and the fastest way to get help. Emails, we respond to those within 24 hours. We do our best. You want to wait 24 hours for feedback? Hell no, no way. So go to the live sessions. That really is the difference, really. So get in there. But again, those skill checks, they help point the way towards, am I understanding the material? Am I successfully navigating this course? Will I be okay with my weekly turn-ins? Now you might ask, well, what's a weekly turn-in? Well, each week we have a skill check. So at the end of the week, you'll have 3, 1 for each class. At the beginning of the very next week, we have a major assignment due. And those things are worth like 15 to 20% of your grade. Do well on those. Don't wait until they're due to start working on them. Great piece of advice. It's not due till next week. Start this week. Does that make sense? I don't care how much you struggle. The more work you put in early, the less freaking out you will do when it becomes due. Because what looks easy always takes longer than you think. I have a conservative multiplier of ×6. If you think it's going to take an hour, anticipate it taking 6. If you think it's 2 hours, yes, 12. Does that make sense? Put in the time. Believe me, it is worth it. If you wait to the last minute, you're going to be disappointed in your result and the grade. So don't do that. You're better than that. Give yourself the time to be successful, because really that's the thing. Give yourself the time. You can do it if you give yourself enough time to do it. So at the end of each week, we have these assets or objects that we're going to turn in, and they're complicated and they take a lot of time, and they are the lion's share of your grade. But what's nice is these skill checks, not only do they help guide you and tell you how well you're doing and how well you understand, each one that you do is worth 1% of your grade. So if you do all 10 of them, you just raised your grade by a full letter. So if you got a C in the class, but you did all the skill checks, you just got a B. If you got a B in the class and you do all the skill checks, you just got an A. Does that make sense? These are easy. Do these. They're worth it. Big time. Make sense? Hell yeah? All right, thank you, thank you. That was a good hell yeah. All right, so that takes us to the lab environment. So the lab is where you're gonna see Marcus and Sarah. Sometimes we'll have other people guesting in there as well. But Marcus and Sarah are in there, and if you're having trouble, you can just say, hey, listen, I'm having a real hard time with this. Could you just sit down right next to me for a second and watch what I'm doing and tell me where I'm going amok? Because I'm not sure where it is. Does that make sense? So if you're in my local class, these guys are awesome. They are right there for you. If you are in my digital class, these guys help you out also, but they're in the Google Hangout like Brian. So you got to go see them in there. And they're just as helpful. It's just nicer when there's somebody who can hold your hand if you need it. So it's good that they're there for that. They are there to help. And it's honestly more fun for them if they're actually helping people than sitting there. So they're bored and they want to help somebody. So ask them a question. You know, it really makes the day go faster for you and them. So make sure you're making good use of that lab time. Incidentally, lab is 6 hours long for my local class. You're going to need every minute of it. That's not enough time to get the work done for this class. Does that make sense? You are going to have to do some of this work at home. So do as much as you can here because you've got live instantaneous results. Make sense in terms of feedback and responses. So make good use of that time. And if you are, for some crazy reason, done with everything, cannot imagine, but let's just say that actually happened. You can watch lectures from the previous months that have been recorded, know what I'm going to talk about before we get to the next class. Because if you watch that lecture and you know what I'm going to talk about, you're not struggling with verbiage, you're dealing with concepts right from go. Does that make sense? So if you can watch those lectures ahead, even that is a great use of your time when you are in lab. Get that information in your brain as soon as you can, because it will help. It'll help tremendously. And what I would recommend for this first lab, you know, do the assignment. That won't take that long. But then what I want you to do is go through that download section, download everything that we asked you to download. Install everything we asked you to install. Make sure everything is working, because when we come back to class on Wednesday, I assume you're ready to go. You know exactly what you're doing. You have all the things that you need and you know where it is. That's also important on your computer, because we're going to be doing activities and assignments and you need to understand what these things are. So unless you've downloaded them and you made a special folder on your hard drive with this stuff that's in it, as I detail for you, you're not going to be ready. You're going to get caught. You're going to get, freak out a little bit and get nervous. Take the time, use this first lab to get your feet underneath you solid so that you're ready to go. Does that make sense? This is not really a fly by the seat of your pants kind of class. It's just not. It has to be like this. So make sure you know what's going on and you got everything working so that when we get together on Wednesday, we're like a well-oiled machine and we go right into more material. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, awesome, awesome. Okay, now, just to give you a look at this week's objective and what we're looking at, what you're going to be turning into me is a Maya file, and we're going to give you these columns. There's like a scene file with columns in it, and basically the objects that you build this week will be placed on these columns, kind of like you're showing it off, to show off what you've accomplished this week. Does that make sense? Okay, now we have a video that talks about the turn-in procedure and it explains exactly how to bring those assets in, line them up and all that kind of thing. It does not step-by-step tell you absolutely everything you have to do. Does that make sense? Otherwise you don't need a lecture. So some of the stuff I say, some of the stuff is on the video, but all of it works together. Does that make sense? So you got to use everything that I give you. If I could teach the class with fewer assets and fewer instructions, I would. They don't pay me by the assignment and they don't pay me by the word. So I have to get it all out or you don't get everything you need to be successful in the next class. Does that make sense? It's almost like each thing that we teach you is a part of your utility belt. And if you're not ready, you're in, the scene of battle and you're missing a key accessory. So it's not good. So we got to make sure you get everything you need so you're ready for the next thing. So again, this is just a quick look at a couple of objects on some columns to show off your work, and that's what you'll be turning in for your weekly turn-in. All right. Any questions on the stuff we've talked about so far? I know we've talked about a lot, but That's okay. Yes. Yes. After the lecture, you're going to go to lab. Lecture is straight through the whole 2 hours, no break. And honestly, we used to have 4-hour lectures, so be glad it's only 2. So 2 hours of lecture, then you guys go to lab. There is a break. I believe it's the first one is like 2 hours in or something like that. So there'll be a break, and then that's when you go get something to eat, walk around, get some fresh air, whatever. I recommend highly taking little breaks here and there. You know, don't be gone too long, but fresh air is good, blood circulation is good. And you guys have heard of that 20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes, you got to look at something that's 20 feet away for about 20 seconds just to kind of break it up for your eyes so you're not just drilled into the screen for hours and hours. It's just not good for you. So just, you know, again, mix it up a little bit, fresh air, talk to each other. That's all good stuff. It makes the learning environment a little bit easier, a little bit more human. So I recommend that highly. But like I said, there are breaks built in. But if you're like, oh man, if I don't have a cheeseburger in 2 minutes, I'm gonna pass out. You know, please by all means go get a cheeseburger. I don't want you to not eat. But better if you kind of have food with you and keep it hidden. And then if you need to, you know, go out in the hallway and eat it real quick and then go back into lab versus, you know, we're off to Chuck E. Cheese. You know, it's not a good idea. I have my concerns about the ball pit and other things at Chuck E. Cheese, but you know what I mean? It's distracting, it's long distance, you're gonna be gone a long time. You're gonna be missing valuable pieces of time that you will wish you had back. So, does that answer your question? Okay, cool. I'm glad you asked that one too. That's another great question. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, what I would say is show me the stuff that you're doing week 1, midway through week 2. If you're crushing it and you just want to try those harder level 3 stuff, of course I'm going to let you do that. I would love for you to do that and give you enough time to do them well. You know what I mean? So because I would love to show other students, hey, look at this. This is what can be accomplished. It sets a standard, so it's nice. And to be perfectly honest with you, you want to bite off a little bit more than you think you can handle, because that's really where you grow the most. If you do just safe stuff, you'll get it all done, but you're not growing as quickly as if you choose something that's harder. That being said, you don't want to go for the most difficult thing you've ever done for your life, because if it totally humiliates you and you feel like an idiot, you have nothing to turn in, you get a terrible grade and a bad opinion of yourself, that's also not good. So, you know, best is a little bit harder than you think you can handle. Stay with what you think you can do, being the next one down, and then, you know, do what's asked of you would be 3rd tier, and going in way over your head with, you know, rocks tied to your ankles, last choice, if that makes sense. But yeah, I want you guys to have fun. I want you to be challenged. That's important. Another good question. Thank you. Alrighty, so what we're going to be talking about today's class, lecture 1 material, we're going to be talking about folder creation, which is something we do every time we start a project. I'm going to teach you this today. Guess when you're going to have to do it? Today, we'll do a practice run of it, and then you're going to do it again week 3. Because week 3, you have to make this stuff. Because I told you how to do it. The first 2 weeks, we set up this stuff for you in advance, kind of like training wheels. We've taken some of the pressure off you by doing some of the work for you. But as we move, we let go. You got to keep pedaling or you're going to get an owie. Does that make sense? So the stuff I'm telling you today will impact you week 3. Remember I said that. So make sure you're ready. We're going to be talking about the Maya interface, which again is huge and intimidating, but we're going to try to make it a little bit more simple for you, break it down to the core ideas of what's going on in there. We're going to talk about the importance of reference. And we're going to delve into polygon primitives, and those are sort of the building blocks for everything that we make, literally and figuratively. Much like when you're drawing, we start with simple primitives to fill volume and shape in order to create the objects we wish to draw. So it works the same way, except we're working with these things called primitives. All right, first things first, a little bit of file management. Organization is critical, obviously, when you're working with a team of people and you've got many assignments and all kinds of work to do, because that's the way it is. It's not a one thing at a time line of work. You're always juggling a bunch of stuff. So organization is really important. Naming things properly, organizing them in such a way that you know where they are, setting them up so other people can find the work that they need. All of these are aspects of working as part of a team. And without it, we have utter chaos. Now, one of the things that we can do to help organize things is to get everybody on the same page. And when I say everybody, I don't mean just the people involved, but the applications we're working with. Because when you are working with Maya, you guys are a team. You are creating the art, but we're using math to do it. So as a result, there's a direct conflict right there. Broad stroke, creativity, fun, numbers. You know, those are two opposite things, but these two things have to come together. And that level of organization and mutual understanding is what leads to everything going well. Does that make sense? It's kind of like a marriage, you know? Typically we seek in others that which we do not have. Without that other person, we don't do our job as a team as well. So you and Maya are going to get married. All right. So again, in terms of why we do this stuff, it just makes things move more smoothly. Everything works better. There's a lot less confusion. And again, not just with the people, but with the machines. So there's some things that we have to be aware of when we're putting together this work and making it in such a way that other people can use it and find it. Because if they can't find it, it's the same as if you didn't do it, because they can't have it. All right, so what we're going to talk about now, and this is an activity slide, so whenever you see this slide pop up, Sarah lifting weights, I'm jogging, and Marcus is doing push-ups, you know we're going to do a little in-class activity together. So it's you know, a follow-along thing, because there are some follow-along things. The class in general is not a follow-along, because some of the things I demonstrate will go much faster than you could possibly go as a beginner. And again, that's not a challenge thing. I've been working with Maya for about 15 years now. How many of you have worked with Maya for 15 years? Okay, so nobody in this room. So point being, will I go faster than you can probably go? Most likely. Does that make sense? Not because I'm smarter or better, I've just done it longer. Does that make sense? So that's why I say there are times where we write stuff down, and then there's times where we work, you know, and we work together, and it is a follow along. So be aware. We're about to go into one of our work together kind of things, and that is the folder creation. And incidentally, if you don't have Maya installed and on your machine already, that's okay. This is the one and only day you can get away with not being ready for class. Does that make sense? And the only reason I allow this, I mean, it's in the instructions. If you look at it, it says, be ready when class starts, have these things. But some people get added late on the first day. People's schedules change, their curriculum changes. And to be fair, the classes that came before this one don't really ask as much of you as I do. Does that make sense? The precedent is not there. You're not ready. So today, you're okay. But be aware, you got to keep taking notes, you got to keep asking questions. But Wednesday, that won't fly. You got to be ready. Make sense? So today's the only day, no big deal. And again, when you're in lab today, can Marcus and Sarah make sure you've got Maya installed and ready to go? Absolutely. That's what they're there for. Does that make sense? Please make sure all of that stuff is ready to go. So if you can do this, we'll do this together. Otherwise, just make sure you're writing it down, because you will have to do this and you need to know it. All right, so let's go to our file activity. And I'm going to launch my copy of Maya here. And again, in terms of working, let me see, does this thing come out? Oh yeah. When we are doing work as a business, we love filing cabinets, right? Because they help us organize stuff. We got drawers, and inside those drawers, we have miles and miles of envelopes and paperwork. It is a hoarder's dream, right? Well, when it comes to working in Maya, it's kind of the same way. When I'm working on a project, I've got a whole bunch of different areas where I need to store all kinds of different information. Some of it I need because, you know, I'm the artist who's driving this thing, right? Some of it Maya needs because Maya's doing all the crazy math that makes it happen. So as a result, all of these folders have to be intact, organized, and properly set up so that Maya can find what Maya needs, I can find what I need, and we can complete this project. Because we will have many projects. Does that make sense? And we're always telling Maya, okay, now I'm working on this. Okay, now I'm working on this. And then we all have to get on the same page and get the things we need. Does that make sense? Okay, so the organization and the folders and all that stuff, very important. So anytime we create a project or we start a project, the first thing we do is make a project folder system. And it's very easy to do. All we have to do is on our main menu items up here, go to File, and you will see Project Window. So if you click on that with your left mouse button, and incidentally, do I need a 3-button mouse? Yes, you do. Make sure you've got one. Maya has a 3-button mouse application. Can I use my tablet and my pen? Because my pen has a 3-button mouse use. Yes, you can, absolutely, if you would prefer. In fact, ergonomically, the pen is probably better for you, but I started learning with the mouse, and it's really hard for me to get away with that. I texture with the pen, but I just can't work with Maya with the pen yet. So under my main menu item, File, I go to Project Window. Left mouse button, click on that, and it opens up my project window. So next, if you look at your project window, upper right-hand corner, there's a button that says New. I'm going to start a new project. I want to build this really cool robot. So I click on the button New. And it says, well, what is it? Well, I'm going to make this cool robot. Cool robot. And what you'll notice is when I was writing this out, the R in robot uppercase, because I'm trying to show that these are 2 words and the R is the beginning of the next word. We don't want to use spaces because spaces are non-characters. Machines have a hard time with that. What's the space, right? So we capitalize the letter, or something else that we can do that also works well is you can put an underscore in there. Anything to kind of break it up, but put something in there. Make sense? Naming conventions. All right. Now, the next thing it's asking me is it says location, and it's telling me that it's going to my documents folder, into my Maya folder, into my projects, right? This is showing me the path to where this thing is going to be. Now, for me, I want to make it easier to show you guys what this thing looks like and how it works. So I'm going to switch it so that it's making this project on my desktop. So if I want to change where it's set for, what I have to do is click on these little yellow folders. Anytime you see a yellow folder in Maya, what that's saying is navigate me to the thing you want. Take me there. It should be a compass if Autodesk ever asked me, but they have it as a yellow folder. So I click on the yellow folder and it says, okay, where do you want this thing to be? Well, I want it to show up on my desktop, please. So I choose desktop and hit select. So now if you look at the path, it's going to my desktop. Make sense? Okay. Now there's a whole bunch of folders in here and they all have very specific names, and these are the names that Maya is used to working with. I'm going to leave those as such. Some companies will ask you to give some of these folders specific names, and then in that case they would tell you what to switch it to, but most work from default, so we leave them as they are. And you just hit accept. And then what happens is now I've got this folder on my desktop called Cool Robot. And when I open it up, I see Maya's folder structure in there, right? All of these folders, all of which have different jobs. The scenes file is where your actual physical Maya files will be. Source images files, this is where your images and your reference will be. You'll get a little workspace Mel. This is the icon or the component of the file that actually launches the interface and everything for you. So all of these things work together to create a Maya project. Does that make sense? In this case, Cool Robot. Now, the next thing that I will typically do after I create a project is I want to set my project. And this I cannot stress enough how important it is. It seems really silly, but setting the project is how I explain to Maya, this is what I want to work on right now. I want to work on Cool Robot. Because if I don't tell Maya, Maya's going to go looking somewhere else for the stuff I'm asking for, not be able to find it, give me a big fuss. I'll get a lot of warnings in the warning area, all kinds of red stuff popping up. I can't find this, I can't find that. Nothing matches, where are my shoes? All kinds of stuff. So what I want to do is make sure Maya and I are on the same page. Everything populates properly. Maya can find everything it needs, textures, reference images, whatever. Therefore, I have to before I do anything, as soon as I launch Maya, the next thing I do is set my project. So I want to work on my Cool Robot, so I have to set my project to the Cool Robot folder. Again, a very simple process, but things go badly when you don't do that. So setting the project, again, you go to your main menu item file, and you'll see right below project window, set project. So I click on set project, and then Maya says, okay, what do you want to work on? And you can navigate to whatever you want, wherever the heck it is. In this instance, on my desktop, that's where Cool Robot is. So I select the outer folder of Cool Robot. And I know I have the right folder selected because when I double click on it, I see the interior folders. I don't have to select any of those. I just have to let Maya know I'm building my Cool Robot. Does that make sense? So all I have to do is select Cool Robot because that's the thing I want to work on. And I hit set. Now my project is set. Image planes will populate. Textures will populate. Files and components of the file that Maya saves will go to the right folders. When I save my files, I know where they're going. They're going to the scenes file folder because I told Maya that's what I'm working on. If you don't set that stuff up, things are missing. You can't find things. Maya is saving things where Maya wants to. That's bad, in case you weren't sure. How many of you guys have ever lost files? Right? Is that a nightmare finding them sometimes? Setting the project so cuts down on that. It's just like, it's like saying please when you ask for something. So much more likely for things to work, right? As opposed to give me that. So set the project. It's how we say please. All right. Very good. Any questions about those things that we talked about? Again, creation of the project, setting the project folder. Pretty simple, very important. Good? Okay, awesome. All right, let's get into the interface. Now, Maya's interface is intimidating. I will grant you that, especially now that they've gone to this all gray shell. It didn't used to be gray. It was like blue and red and white and yellow, and there was all kinds of cute colors in there, and I don't know what happened. Everybody went Batman. You know, Maya used to be like, let's build something, you know, and now it's like, what do you want to make? So it's a little different, but from what I understand, it's supposed to be less stressful because it's all gray and sedate like that. But, you know, I think it's more appropriate to the seeming personality of the application now that it's more Batman-like. But in terms of the interface, there's a lot of stuff going on there, and it can be intimidating. So what we're going to do is we're going to break things down, talk about the broad strokes about what's going on in the interface and where things are. And hopefully it'll start to make sense for you. And it's just like learning a new language. Maya is its own language. So what we're going to do is kind of become familiar with those terms, more of a better understanding of what it is we're saying and what we're talking about, so that when you ask me a question, you're using the right verbiage when you're asking me. And then when I answer you, you actually know what I'm talking about. So, you know, thingamadoodle, what's a majigger, you know, those are not terms we can use. We have to try to use the Maya terms, and it's so much easier to get and ask for help when you know what you're talking about. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's delve into the Maya interface. And again, it's not too bad when you take it a little bit at a time, just like any language you're trying to learn. All right, let's talk about Maya's interface and what's going on here. All right, across the top, we have these things, these main menu items. These main menu items are basically tools and actions. An example of a tool from our world would be like a screwdriver or a hammer. An example of an action would be like cut this thing in half, drill a hole in this, glue these things together. Does that make sense? And all that stuff is housed under your main menu items. Now, the main menu items, all you have to do to access a tool or an action is to click on the main menu, and then this little drop-down menu pops up, and you can see all the fun little tools that you can choose from. And if you look over to the side, there's little boxes next to a whole bunch of them. And what these are, or what that is the options box for the tool. The reason being, oftentimes tools have more than one way they can work, and it depends on what its settings are as to what it does. For example, hammers drive nails in as well as pull them out. It depends on how you're holding the thing. Does that make sense? So you have to set the tool for the job you need it to do. Are you pulling nails in, or you push them in or driving them out? So idea is make sure of what your settings are. So anytime you want to mess with the settings of a tool, all you have to do is go to the options box and click on it with the left mouse button, LMB. If you click on that, it opens up the options associated with the tool. Now, typically, there's some kind of reset. So if you've changed the options or it's not doing what you expect it to, you can just reset it right there. But what's also super helpful, literally and figuratively, is there's usually a tool help button in there. And if you press that and you have a internet connection, what it will do is launch Maya's help documents. And literally, it's going to tell you how this tool works. It's going to give you some ideas of some of the settings that you can make. So if you have questions on how a tool works, even if I haven't shown you how it works, you can kind of use these help documents and get a little bit of extra help with it. So if you're struggling with something, use these help documents. It's another great place to go at 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm not available and you're trying to figure out how something works. So feel free to tap into that and get some feedback. And again, once you're in the help documents, you can search for whatever the heck it is you want and try to find it in there as well. So again, instructions on how things work. And then there's usually really cool links to other things that are very similar. So you can get more information about whatever it is you don't have a good understanding of or would like to know more about. So this is really helpful. All right. Main menu items, tools and actions and settings under there. Now, in terms of Maya, Maya does many, many things. And we have to actually tell Maya what it is we want it to do so that Maya knows what options of tools to work with we have to choose from. And we do that using the status line. This icon right here, that's how we explain to Maya what kind of work we're trying to do. Let's say, for example, Maya is an application that builds houses, all right? There are a lot of different tools and skill sets that go into building a house, but you use different tools for shingling than you do for interior painting, right? Drop cloths and brushes versus crowbars, spatulas, roof tar, nails, hammers, different stuff, right? Nail guns. So point being, if I'm doing interior painting, I don't even need to see the shingling tools. I only need to see the interior painting tools. So what we do is we use the status line there to tell Maya what kind of job we're doing, and then Maya gives us a choice of tools to choose from, because otherwise there'd be tools everywhere and it's hard to organize, right? So if you don't see the main menu item you want, check your status line and make sure it's set for the right thing, because you'll notice if I switch this to say animation, I have different menu items. So if you don't see what you need, make sure you're set for the right status line setting. This is a polygon modeling class. Most of the stuff you need is going to be under modeling, so make sure that that's what it's set for. Left mouse button will allow you to change that to whatever you need. All right. Now, this area here are our shelves and shelf tabs. And what these things do is they basically, again, compartmentalize and organize things for you. We are a modeling class, so most of the stuff we need is going to be under poly modeling. And you'll see we have a whole bunch of little icons here. And these are buttons. And these buttons are shortcuts to main menu items. For example, if you look under Edit Mesh, the Extrude tool, right? There's the icon for the Extrude tool. So rather than going to Edit Mesh, Extrude, something you could do is come to this icon right here, which is the Extrude tool, and click it there. It's a little bit faster, right? You don't have the options necessarily, but you can get to the Extrude tool more quickly there. Now, again, you might not be able to memorize these icons right away, but if you hover your cursor over anything in Maya, Maya will tell you what it's called in two places. You'll either get a little help balloon, which pops up and tells you what the heck that thing is called. Also, if you look down here in the lower left-hand corner, this is Maya's help line. So right here, Maya's going to write down what's the thing called and it'll tell you a little bit about how it works. Now, if you know what it's called, what else could you do to figure out how it works? Yeah, look it up, right? Use Maya's help documents. Hey, I know what it's called. It's the extract tool. What the heck does this thing do? And then, boop, as long as you have an internet connection, Maya's self-help documents will help you out, explain how it works, settings and so forth. So again, a lot of resources available to you, but you have to be proactive. All right. So again, shelf tabs and these fun little buttons here, shortcuts. All right. Now, along here, this area is called your toolbox. The toolbox is basically the way you interact with your environment. These are your hands. This is how you work and create. So, for example, let's say I'm going to create an object. I'm going to make a cylinder. All right. I've got a cylinder right there. And in terms of that cylinder, when it's green, it's selected. When it's not green, it's not selected. But let's say I want to work with this thing, right? The toolbox is what's going to allow me to do that, interact with it. This first icon here, this arrow, that's the select tool. It allows you to select things. Sometimes you just want to select something and say, what is this? Or I want this to do something with that. But you just need to select it. I'm not necessarily changing it just yet. So I use my select tool. And when I have my select tool in my hand, my cursor looks kind of like an arrow, and I can select an object with the left mouse button. It's currently selected. When I select something, you'll notice information populates over here. If nothing is selected, nothing's over there. But if I select it, ooh, this is P cylinder 1, poly cylinder 1. This is where it is in space. These are the inputs associated with poly cylinder 1. So all of a sudden now I've got information about this thing I've selected. This area over here is called the channel box. The channel box is basically explaining what this thing is. You know, if you're watching a nature show and there's that narrator voice that comes on, and now we see the blue-footed booby as it approaches the field mouse. You know, that's basically what's going on. Over here, we have information. So if I select something, that's what that is. Make sense? Okay. It's like being able to touch something and suddenly a little speech balloon pops up and tells you what it is, right? Wouldn't that be sweet? So again, select tool allows you to select things. All right. The next tool down, this is my move tool. All right. And in terms of the move tool, as you would imagine, it allows you to move things. The arrows correspond to axes of movement. Blue is Z, or depth, forwards and backwards. Red is X, left and right. Green is Y, up and down. Maya is a Y up application. Does that make sense? Okay, so if I want to move this object, I use my move tool, and I can literally grab an arrow and move the object up or down. You'll notice that when I move an object above the grid, I'm generating positive values. Above the grid is positive. When I move it down, I get negative values. I am moving a negative Y. In terms of negative versus positive, the arrow is always pointing in the positive direction. The opposite direction will be negative. Does that make sense? Okay, Maya is basically a giant Cartesian grid coordinate system, positive and negative values. Now, in terms of these values generating in the channel box over here, these numbers are basically grid units. Grid units are an arbitrary value to measure the movement. This little square is a grid unit. So if I move this thing 4.138 grid units, it's basically 4.138 squares within this space. Does that make sense? It's just a way of measuring. So you might be wondering, well, can I plug in a value and say, well, I want it to be 5 grid units up in the air? Yeah, you can plug it in. Typically, as an artist, we don't have exact values. We're usually kind of eyeballing things. But if you need a precise value, can you plug it in? Absolutely. Hit return. But yeah, you can just put in a value. If I change this back to 0, it goes to the origin. Zeros are origin, all zeros, right? And then there's my object at the origin. Make sense? Okay, so if I want to move this object, I can grab the arrows that direct it to wherever I want to go. And you might say, well, that's kind of tedious. I have to grab the arrow? Wah, I don't like that. Well, you can actually grab in the middle if you want. If you hover your cursor over the middle of the icon, hold down your left mouse button, you can wing that thing all over the place pretty fast and pretty easy. But what's happening in the channel box? It's changing values, right? All of them at one time. And that's because your screen is 2D space. It's flat, but it represents depth, 3D. So Maya's kind of guessing how far back you're moving it. Does that make sense? Maya is a horrible guesser. So it's kind of messy when you grab it in the middle. So what we typically do, if we're trying to get some precision out of it, is we will take the object, bring it really close to where we want it to go, and then we will use the arrows for more refinement. Does that make sense? Good hell yeah? Okay. Now, other fun things. Next tool down, rotate tool. Guess what that does? I'm not trying to trick you. Absolutely, like a roller coaster or like a record player. So in terms of the way this works, you grab the exact axis that you want it to rotate on. So for example, blue is what axis? Z-axis. So I grab the blue axis and I rotate it. And you'll notice in the rotate Z-axis of the channel box, it's generating values. So if I knew, for example, I wanted this thing to rotate 45 degrees, I could actually plug in that value and get exact degrees of rotation. Make sense? This outer ring is kind of whirly-burly in all directions at once, kind of like grabbing the move tool in the middle. It's a little bit messy. All zeros, again, will return you back to the origin and level. Make sense? Okay. Next tool down, scale tool. Also color-coded axes. Scale is how we make things bigger or smaller. What you will notice when we're using the scale tool is when we scale both positively and negatively at the same time. Scaling in X, scaling in Y. Make sense? It goes in both axes, both directions. If I want my object to retain its proportions but get bigger or smaller, I scale from this light blue cube in the middle. Left mouse button over this guy and drag, it gets bigger, it gets smaller. Again, could I put in values over here? Absolutely. If I want this cube to be 3 times larger than it is right now, I can highlight the scale axes, plug in a 3 for all 3 of them, and now the cube is exactly 3 times larger than it was previously. 1 is what it starts at, 1/1 scale, how it was created, that size. Make sense? Okay, cool. Now, this area down here, this is for animation purposes. This is your animation timeline. Are you guys familiar with flipbooks at all? Flipbooks, you draw a picture on a piece of paper, draw another picture on another piece of paper, you show them in rapid succession, and due to a phenomenon called persistence of vision, we see movement, or what we think is movement. Well, this is the way this works. Each stop on this timeline represents 1 frame or 1 drawing of an animation. So when we're making a movie or something, each one of these represents one piece of paper or one frame, 24 of them, 1 second of time. And you can set your range for whatever you want. Ultimate duration, how much am I looking at? But this is when we won't get into animation, but that's what that's for when we're animating. This here is our play controls. And this works basically like a DVD player. You know, play my animation forward, stop, play my animation backward, stop, go 1 keyframe back, go 1 keyframe forward, go 1 frame back, 1 frame forward, go to the beginning, go to the end. Just allows you to jump around. Does that make sense? Just a time saver. This area here is Maya's layer editor. How many of you guys have used Photoshop? A couple of you? Okay, good. Now, Photoshop, the power of Photoshop comes from its layers. And basically, the layers are like pieces of paper. And you stack them on top of each other. The layers are visibly on top of each other when you look at the application. But the whole idea is I'm looking down on a bunch of layers, topmost layer being on top. The layers interact. They make cool stuff. Maya's layer editor is not quite as powerful as that. Too bad, but it is not the way it works. However, the organizational capacity of the layer editor is very much the same. Can I lock layers? Can I link layers together? Can I set things up on layers to make them visible or not visible to help my workflow? That's how it works. Again, much more of an organizational capacity, but more or less the same idea. Just not quite as heavily in depth with the art side of it. All right, and we already talked about this area over here. What's this called here? That's the what now? Channel box, absolutely. Channel box, your best friend. Information about what you've selected. We're always looking for that. Tell me about this thing. P-Cube1. Polygon Cube 1. Now, in the middle here, we have our window, our workspace, work panel. There's a lot of different names for it. You'll notice that the panels, they even have their own menu items, little drop-down menus that talk about this particular view. This view is your perspective view, PERSP, right? And it's got perspective, right? That looks like a real world with depth in it. Now, this is just one view of this object. If you look down here in Maya, let me see if I can make it visible or not. No, it's not going to let me see it. I can't make it fit with this layout. Let me do my system preferences and I'll make it fit. All right, I know it's going to be a little bit smaller, but I want you to see this area here of the interface where we have the saved layouts. Now this is your perspective view, and that's what this icon is, perspective. But we also have this view called 4View. And basically what 4View is 4 views of the exact same thing. The difference is this window has perspective. These 3 are called orthographic views. Orthographic meaning perfectly flat, no depth. So for example, you'll notice in this view, the object looks like a cube. In all these other views, they look like squares. Cube is a 3D or depth-related concept. There is no depth in these views. Why would I even want these views then, you would ask? Well, here's the thing. When we're trying to line objects up, it is very difficult to line them up in the perspective view alone. But if I use my orthographic views, looks good in this window, looks good in that window, I know it's good in this window. Does that make sense? All these windows work together. Now, the cool thing is you can actually jump from window to window. They don't have to stay this small. If you put your cursor over any window and you hit the space bar, it maximizes that window. So if you want to go to a different window, you hit space bar again, go to another window, hit space bar, now I'm in that window. So you can jump in and out of whatever window you want to be in, again, for ever better, more accurate use of whatever it is you're aligning. Does that make sense? They all work together. And again, the space bar helps you fly around. Alrighty. That is the Maya interface, your first introduction. Again, it's a lot to wrap your head around. The more you immerse yourself in it, the faster you will understand this. It's kind of like if you're trying to learn a foreign language. If you really want to learn another language, the best thing you can do is go to that country. Set you down in the middle of that place. Because you need a cheeseburger, you need a beer, and you know where the bathroom is, right? So you're going to find out how to say those things pronto. Does that make sense? So with Maya, same thing holds true. You have to practice this. You have to spend time with the machine. I recommend at a minimum 2 hours every night outside of class. Go do all your class stuff, do all that stuff, work on the machine. You want to know it, that's how you do it. And the weird thing is everybody gets it at a different rate of speed, and there's no correlation between how smart you are and how fast you get it, how technically savvy you are and how fast you get it, how creative you are and how fast you get it. None of those things matter. But the one trait that I have noticed is the more obsessive you are, the faster you get good at it. And that's really what you need. Be obsessive. You want to own this thing as quickly as you can, because you got to get over this rough stage where you don't know what you're doing and you're struggling and you feel awkward and uncomfortable, right? It's, you know, like I said, like riding a bike. You're going to fall down a lot at first. You don't want anybody to see that. Dad, go away. But you got to get through that phase if you want to do wheelies. So we got to do this part. Put in the time, you know, if you have to, make sure nobody's looking, but put in the time, get the work in, and that's what you can do at home. Work on the activities. Work on the skill checks. That's what I gave you that stuff for. It's like going to the batting cage, you know. Practice. And that's how you get good. And that's the good news. You know, there's no magical powers. Your midichlorian count's not going to help you. It helps me, but not you. No, it's it's just practice, straight up, like anything else you've ever learned how to do in your life. Anybody can do this. The question is, are you focused enough? Are you driven enough? And are you passionate enough to put in the time to get over this rough patch of I don't know what's going on? Does that make sense? It's all on you. You can do it if you want to and you're willing to. Those are the only two variables I can't control. And actually, I'm kind of glad I can't. But that is you, you know? And if this is what you want to do for a living, you'll do this. It's that simple. You are your own motivator. No one will drive you harder than you, ever, at anything. Not even your mom. She loves you very much, but she won't make you work as hard as you will make you work. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. So, any questions about Maya's interface? Or are we ready for some more shenanigans? All right, more stuff it is. Oh, let me change my resolution back to something a little bit more clown size. All right, cool. All right, let's talk about the 5 phases of modeling. For our class, we are going to have 5 phases of modeling, and they are designing or gathering your reference. Reference is the most important first step you have to take to anything you decide to do or build. And whether that's finding reference on the internet, taking pictures of whatever it is, or drawing it yourself. Can you draw things and use that as your reference? Yes, you can. In this class, no, you cannot. But after this class, all you want. And in fact, on your own time, all you want. We'll show you how to do it. But for this class, make sure you get the stuff done for us. Then we get into the block out or primitive build, and that's where we're just trying to occupy shape and form of the object. Building the object in logical parts. We're going to talk all about how many pieces things should be made of, and that should help out a ton. We're going to talk about UV mapping, which is what we do to prep polygon geometry for the texturing process. And texturing is awesome. So much fun texturing. And then, of course, cleanup and organization of your files so that you can pass it on to the next person in the CG production pipeline, and they can actually do their job without saying your name in vain. Make sense? Okay. So those are our steps. Number one, reference. As I said before, reference is critical. The better your reference, the faster and the more accurate you can do your job. So the better the reference, the better the job is you do from it. So gathering a lot of reference is a great idea. In fact, I think reference gathering is one of my favorite parts of any project I undertake. Because I like, oh, you know what, I want to build this Messerschmitt, whatever. Now all of a sudden I'm researching Messerschmitts, I'm learning everything I can about these things, I'm finding every reference image I can find. Oh, look at these old black and white photos. Oh, look, this is what the cockpit looks like. Oh, look at this rare image of the spittoon in the aircraft that the pilot was using. You know, cool, I'm going to put that in my model. You know, there's a lot of stuff you can learn from reference images, and the more of them you get, the better off you are, because you understand that thing you're trying to make. Remember me saying that whole, you got to understand it? Got to understand it if you're going to do a good job of building it. So reference gathering, super fun and very, very important. And what I'd like you guys to start doing is, when you're gathering reference, I want you to take a look at the objects and try to see the simple primitives that are hidden inside those objects, right? Are they cylinders? Are they spheres? Are they cones? Because just like when you're trying to draw something, you start with a simple primitive for volume and shape, right? If I'm going to draw a telephone pole, I start with a cylinder, right? Modeling works the same way. If I want to model a telephone pole, I'm going to start with a cylinder because that does most of the work for me. Make sense? Okay, so again, when you're looking at your reference, try to see the simple primitives inside, because no matter what you're trying to build, whether it's organic or inorganic, it is composed of simple primitives. So you just got to find those simple primitives because they're going to help you build this thing. All right. Now, we, instead of drawing simple primitives, are going to be using polygon primitives. And they're very simple objects: spheres, cubes, cones, cylinders, planes, the donut. They call it a torus. But yeah, donut works for me. But these simple primitives help us build whatever it is we're making, right? Death Stars, Tesseracts, trade ship, blockade vehicles, right? So we need those things. Does that make sense? Okay. Who can tell me what that is? Yes. How about that? Spider-Man. A cat. Absolutely. What we are looking at is silhouette. Silhouette or shape is a 2D concept. Silhouette or shape identifies an object for what it is. The most important thing as a modeler is to make sure you hit silhouette when you're trying to build an object. I should be able to look at the shadowy outline of anything you've built, and I know right away what it is. That's critical. That means it looks right. Does that make sense? So shape and silhouette is a critical part of does it look right? It's just the technical artistic name for does it look right, or one aspect of does it look right. Silhouette is critically important because even through silhouette, which is a fairly nondescript detail, right? There's no surface detail, but I can tell different species of dog or different kinds of trees just from their silhouette. I don't even need surface detail. I know what it is. That's how powerful silhouette is, and that's why it's important. So when we're modeling, we've got to hit silhouette. As a result, this is something we're grading on. So if, for example, this is the reference image you're given, this lamp, this is what you're trying to build. These lamps are close enough to that lamp in silhouette that I would say, yeah, that's that lamp. I recognize it specifically. Therefore, you would earn the points associated with silhouette, however many there were. These, they're too different. They're not close enough. I don't see that lamp specifically when I look at those. Therefore, you don't get the silhouette points. Does that make points? Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. What's that? This one? Well, it has this same base shape here. I've got a multi-tiered base down here. I've got some flaring out there. This shape is relatively similar to that one. I'm seeing that detail in there as well. This one doesn't. It's too far away. There's not enough. I don't have any of this detail going on there. I don't have this detail flaring out up there. It's much too narrow. These are curved. Those are not. This is about detail. This is about training your eye to see the smallest detail, because that's what we are. As modelers, we are 3D copy machines. You feed me a picture, I will generate out a 3D version of it. And unfortunately, perfection is the standard. Does that make sense? That's sick, but perfect is what they expect. It's not like, hey, that's pretty good. It's like, why is this not dead on? Does that make sense? That's the perspective. So what we have to do is train our eye to see this one curves, that one doesn't. That's a miss. Does that make sense? Close enough. You know, I almost got it. I almost made it the way it looked. You almost got that job too. Does that make sense? They expect perfect. It's terrible, but that's the reality. So we have to train our eye to see differences. You got to look close. Form. The other half of does it look right for our class is form. So when I say form, I'm talking about surface detail. And these are terms you guys should be hearing in Art 1 as well. But if you're in my local class, online, you'll get it next month. But form is surface detail, depth-related detail. I can actually see the surface somewhat. This is a 3D concept. So again, same reference image. Here's what I gave you to work from. These lamps are close enough. They're going to earn the form points. These are too different. They're not close enough to the reference image. They miss critical 3D depth-related detail. Now, it's possible to get silhouette points. I recognize it by the silhouette, but you didn't really hit all the 3D details. So it's possible to get one and not the other. It's impossible to get the form without the silhouette, but it is possible to get silhouette without form. Both of those are components of does it look right? Does that make sense? Which results in 34.6% of your grade for that particular object. Does that make sense? How it's coming together? Okay. So we got to hit silhouette, we got to hit form. All right, let's talk about your skill check. Again, the skill check, oh, quick question, silhouette and form, we get that? Okay, because that's all about does it look right? And that's just a means of being able to identify and quantify what you're missing in your models. So if I tell you you missed silhouette, what that means is when I look at that object, I couldn't tell what it was from its silhouette. And I know these objects well. Every class builds the same objects, and these objects came from my basement, my attic, my garage. That's where that stuff came from. I know these objects well. If I can't identify it from its silhouette, you missed. Does that make sense? Okay. Form, 3D or depth-related detail. If I have a jar, are jars hollow? Yeah, if you can't put stuff in it, it's not a jar. So if your jar is not hollow, that's a form-related problem. I might recognize it by its silhouette, but the fact that I can't put anything in it makes it a miss for form. Does that make sense? Okay, so you can get one and not the other. So let's talk about your skill check. In this first skill check, what we're going to do is we're going to start learning how to use the interface. We're going to start learning how to use the tools and how to get more comfortable with them. So we have a skill check assignment, which is called Build Me, also affectionately titled Captain Idaho. Now, since this is a skill check assignment, we have a separate folder for skill checks. We have a folder for activities, and those are the activities we do in class together. And we have this for the skill checks. They're two totally different folder systems because they're two totally different things. So when I want to work on my skill checks, I have to tell Maya that's what I want to work on. How do I tell Maya what I want to work on? By setting my project, absolutely. So when I decide I want to work on my skill check, the first thing I do is I set my project to my skill check file folder. So here I am in Maya, and I say File, Set Project, because that's what I do before I do anything. And on my, in my Documents folder, inside my 3DF folder, I have my activity file folder, which is again what we work on in class, and I have my skill checks, and these are the things that I work on in lab and at home. So I set my project to my skill check file folder. Then I go to File, Open Scene, and I'll see right there at the top, Build Me. Again, with the billions of files on my computer, it goes right to the one I want because I set my project. So inside my 3DF folder, inside my skill check folder, inside my scenes folder is my Build Me file. And I hit Open. No need to save that. It contains mental ray nodes. Oh my goodness, call the police. Errors have occurred. Oh, quit panicking. All right, so here's my file, and you can see, oh wow, this looks rough. We have an object in here. When it's done, it will look like a Mr. Potato Head that's dressed like a pirate. But right now, it looks like a fragmentation grenade hit somebody. But every piece you need is in there. There's nothing we didn't give you. You don't have to do anything other than move pieces, rotate pieces, and scale pieces. That's it. Very simple. What that will teach you is how to use your different windows together, how to use your different tools of manipulation, and how to follow your reference. Where's my reference, you might ask? Well, your reference is on FSO. Let's go there. Boop, here's FSO. And let's look at, let me move this over. And I'm going to go through all this crazy stuff you were supposed to do already, but make sure you go through those 1 through 10 of Let's Get Started. And I'm going to go to my Lecture 1 skill check. That's what it looks like on my end. On your end, it will look like this. Lecture 1 skill check. Woohoo! Yeah, I recognize that catastrophe. This is what the old man's going to look like when you build him, right? I'm going to borrow that picture because the internet and I are buddies. We loan each other stuff all the time. So here's my reference image. That's what Captain Idaho looks like when he's all together, right? Top, front, side, nice perspective view. So all I have to do is rebuild him. So if I select this piece, all of a sudden, oh yeah, that's the body. Thank goodness things are named. How critical is that? Very. Do you think I'm grading on it? For shizzle. So, potato body, that's the name of this piece. Now, if I look at that thing, you see it's kind of big on the top and small on the bottom. When I look at my reference image, it's actually kind of big on the bottom and small on the top. So what's wrong with my potato body? It needs to be rotated. It's upside down, right? So what of my menagerie of tools does that? Rotate tool. So I grab the Z-axis and I rotate them. And again, if I want a specific number of degrees, I can plug in 180 and it's perfectly straight up and down, lined up properly. All right. So now let's say I want to put his nose on there. Now, granted, I can see his nose. It's this thing right here. But let's say I couldn't tell because it was too small or was hidden by another piece or who knows what the heck's going on, right? So if I need to find a piece, if I go to Window, I can go to a window called Outliner. The Outliner is a list of everything that's in your scene. I can select it here and it will light up there, or I can select it there and it will light up here. All windows in Maya work together. They're all showing you the same thing, just from a different perspective. Sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively. So that's the nose. Thank goodness. Now, I can try to move it, right? It's kind of hard in my perspective view, but I can use my orthographics, and that's going to help a lot. Oh, that's facing the wrong way. So I'm going to rotate it. Here, stick the nose in there. I look over here and I say, oh, no, actually that's where the nose goes. I'm gonna have to bring it down, bring it across. That looks pretty good. All right, so my nose is in place. Let's see how that looks compared to my reference. What do you think? Too small, right? So here's what I need to do. Adjust it. If it's a question of scale, you know what tool I need to use. Scale tool. Now, if I scale just in X, it gets wider, but that doesn't look right, right? It's like a torpedo. If I scale just in Z, right? Elephant seal or proboscis monkey. Okay, but if I scale from the middle, I can maintain proportion, right? Because the proportions aren't off on any of these things. They just need to be bigger or smaller. So you'd be scaling from the middle, right? So again, if I look here and I look at my reference, yep, I think I'm doing pretty good there. Make sense? Again, every piece you need is there. You don't have to make anything. You don't have to duplicate anything. Everything you need is there. You just got to move it, rotate it, scale it, and put this guy together. And again, it's going to teach you the tools in the toolbox. It's going to teach you to use the windows. It's going to teach you to use the outliner. And you will learn how these things all come together. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, saving. This is important. You need to save things. When it comes time to save, very, very important to take note of what kind of file this thing started out life as. You will notice that this file, because I made it first, this file is an MA file, buildme.ma, Maya ASCII. Maya files come in two varieties, Maya ASCII and Maya binary, MA and MB. When you save a file, you have to save it as the same type as the original. Otherwise, Maya will panic and tell you it can't do it. And you'll be like, why won't it save? And you'll be crying and upset. And then when you see the answer, you'll be like, you want to kill somebody because it's that simple. Make sense? So when it comes time to save, I look up there and I see it's an MA. So when I want to save it as an MA. So when it's time to save, I go to File, Save Scene As. The name pops up. Here's where I switch it to what file I want. Maya ASCII or Maya binary, MA and MB. My original is an MA, so I want to switch it to Maya ASCII. And then now I'm going to name the file. You can't just create a file and then highlight whatever file type it was and type in the one you want and rename it. That doesn't work. You have to actually save it as the variety of file you want because they're actually totally different. Maya binary files are all ones and zeros. Maya ASCII files are actually text, readable English text. So you can't just convert one to the other. You have to actually open it and save it as the variety you want. Now, in terms of naming, we have specific names for every assignment you turn in. None of them are by chance. There is a naming convention that is in place for not only this class, but the entire school. So we have to follow it. So first thing is you put your name in. Make sure it's your name, not mine. I could probably pass this class. What we're trying to find out is if you can. So we name it with your name first. Gold, underscore, Steve, right? Underscores. Underscore, what assignment is this? This is the Lecture 1 skill check. Underscore, what class is this? This is 3D Foundations, all caps. Caps and lowercase important? With your password is caps and lowercase important? Sometimes. So follow it. Underscore, what year and month did you take 3DF? Well, this is the year 2018, and we are in the August, even though we started at the end of July, 8th month of the year. So that's the correct naming convention. If you give me this file and it says Lecture 2 assignment, you blew the naming convention. That's almost a letter grade off. I'm not even kidding. It's almost 10 points for just getting the name right. Get the easy stuff. If you're gonna have trouble with this class, if you're gonna struggle with the hard stuff. You know what I mean? Shape and form, that's hard. You can name something properly. That's just taking the time to make sure you name it right. Does that make sense? Anybody can do that. I don't care what you came in here with. Following directions, that's important. Yeah.
What's after the class name again?
The year and month you took the class. It is the year 2018. So your naming convention will start with 18, the year 2018. And we are doing August, which is the 8th month of the year. So it's 08. 1808 is how every file you sign name will be named. So this is the naming convention. And again, it'll be just like this for your weekly turn-in, just like this for your activities. Whatever it is you give me, it's going to follow this naming convention. And if you give it to me with a lowercase d and a lowercase f, yep, you just lost about 9 points. And you don't want that, right? Get the easy points. Lose points over the hard stuff. And that's why I tell you, if you work right up till 11:59 and that assignment's due at midnight, you do not have time to make sure you're naming stuff right, named your geometry. There's a bunch of little things that take like 2 seconds to do, but when you're panicked and you're trying to quickly turn stuff in because the deadline is looming, you miss those things. And as you saw, they account for about 70% of the grade, right? Because only 35% is what does it look like, right? Don't miss the easy stuff. I give you a lot of points, but you have to pay attention. That's all. Make sense? All right. You guys have your assignment. You know where you need to go. You got to go to lab. When you're looking at your lab in FSO, sometimes there's more than one section, so you have to actually choose your section. You guys are in section 1. Then your lab time and location will become available so you can see it. But you guys are in Full Sail 4B. I think it's room 130. All righty. I will see you guys on Wednesday. Thank you very much for a good class. And if you have any questions for me, I'll have to meet you out in the hallway because we're out of time and other classes coming in here and I don't want to make them upset at us. So I will meet you outside with any additional questions, but we are good for today. Thank you very much. I will see you on Wednesday and we will hit it running. So be ready for me. Yeah.
What is 3Get LMS for? I tried looking on FSO and Connect. And
Oh, learning management system. It's just the name for FSO.